two identical bookshelves. One arrives fully assembled, the other you build yourself, wrestling with an Allen key and a diagram that seems to have been translated through 4 different languages. Ask people to put a price on each one afterward, and something strange happens. People consistently value the one they built themselves more, sometimes dramatically more, even though every screw, every board, every finished result is exactly the same. Researchers have a name for this, and once you understand it, you start seeing it running quietly underneath half the decisions you make. This was formally documented in 2011 by researchers Michael Norton, Daniel Mochon, and Dan Ariely, in a study that became famous enough to get its own nickname, the IKEA effect. In one of their experiments, participants built simple storage boxes from IKEA, origami figures, and Lego sets, then were asked to bid on their own creations alongside identical, professionally made versions. Across the board, people bid significantly more for the thing they'd assembled with their own hands, even when independent observers rated the homemade version as no better and sometimes worse than the factory-made one. Here's the detail that makes this more than just sentimental attachment. The researchers ran a second version of the experiment where one group of participants was allowed to finish building their object, and another group started building, but had their work taken away before they could finish. The finishers valued their creation significantly more than the non-finishers did. That single result rules out a simple explanation like, people just like the object they were given. The value wasn't coming from ownership alone. It was coming specifically from completed effort. Labor, once it produces a finished result, gets folded into how valuable the thing feels, almost like the hours themselves get priced into the object. This connects to something psychologists call effort justification, a close cousin of cognitive dissonance. If your brain spent real time and frustration on something, it becomes uncomfortable to also believe that the something wasn't worth much. Rather than sit with that contradiction, your brain quietly recalibrates the value upward to match the effort you already sank into it. You didn't build a slightly wobbly bookshelf. You built a bookshelf that took you 90 minutes, 3 trips back to the instructions, and one skip step you had to redo, and all of that gets priced in whether the shelf deserves it or not. The IKEA effect has an important boundary condition that the original researchers also tested, and it's the part most people skip when they repeat this finding. When participants were given a version of the build that was so difficult they couldn't finish it, satisfaction actually dropped instead of rising. So this isn't simply more effort equals more love. It's closer to effort that ends in a completed, functional result equals more love. Struggle that ends in failure doesn't get the same boost and can produce the opposite effect. The furniture has to actually stand up in the end for your brain to reward you for building it. Once you see the mechanism, you start noticing it operating far outside of furniture assembly. It shows up in cooking, where a meal you made from scratch tastes better to you than the identical dish from a restaurant kitchen, holding flavor constant. It shows up in relationships, where people report valuing partnerships more after getting through a difficult, effortful stretch together, not despite the difficulty, but partly because of it. It shows up at work, where employees consistently rate a project plan they helped build as stronger than an objectively identical plan handed to them fully formed, a phenomenon some management researchers now specifically design around, deliberately including teams in small parts of a decision specifically to boost their buy-in afterward. This is also, not coincidentally, a well-understood piece of product design. Companies that ask you to assemble, customize, or personalize something before you receive it aren't only saving on labor costs, They are quietly manufacturing the exact psychological conditions the IKEA effect depends on. Your own hands, your own frustration, your own completed result. A meal kit company doesn't just save money by having you chop the vegetables. It gets you to fall a little bit in love with dinner before you've even tasted it. None of this means the bias is something to eliminate. Used deliberately, it's closer to a tool. If you want to actually stick with a habit, a workspace, or a project, building even a small piece of it yourself, instead of adopting someone else's finished version wholesale, appears to reliably increase how much you value keeping it going. The same mechanism that makes you overrate a wobbly bookshelf can be pointed at things actually worth caring more about. So the next time you catch yourself defending something you built that objectively isn't better than the version you could have simply bought, that isn't a lapse in judgment. That's your brain doing exactly what Norton, Mochon, and Ariely found it reliably does. Pricing your own labor directly into the object, whether or not the object asked for it.